We are live.
Right, okay, this is Senate Finance. This is March 27th. And we are going to be continuing our discussion. That is a bold agenda. Maybe change.
Is this?
No, we have Senator Harding here today. This is for 310. We deleted section 19. Senator Harding, tell the committee what you have and what you'd like.
Yes, okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So S 310, which was the government response to flooding bill, there was a section section 19 that dealt with the 911 system and telecommunications companies providing data to the 911 system and also reporting outages. The Senate Government Operations Committee did quite a bit of work on this issue with the goal of making sure that our 911 system had the data that is necessary to ensure that when there is an emergency, that everyone is in the 911 system, everyone possible is in the 911 system, and that therefore emergency alerts would go out to them. Our emergency alert system uses 911 data, the ET alert system uses 911 data to provide alerts.
That's interesting because I get the alerts on my cell phone. And I didn't think cell phones were in this.
Part of what we want to make sure is that all the types of telecommunications companies that provide phone service are providing their data to the 911 system. You can independently sign up for the VT alert system as well. And the VT alert system sometimes uses reverse 911 to provide alerts.
All right, but that only goes to landlines. Is that correct? Was my understanding.
I think you would have to ask 911 or Vermont
Okay,
Emergency Management who gets what kinds of alerts, but point being is we were trying to make sure that our 911 system has the data for as many Vermonters as possible, so that during the cases of emergency, they are able to provide emergency communications, and also that when there is an outage of phone outage, that carriers themselves are required to alert their own customers. Some of them do and some of them don't. So we had worked on that, then there were, we heard some concerns toward the end, and so then the bill came to you, and I know that you also heard some concerns, so your chair and I talked about having the Government Operations Committee take more testimony and try to get to some language where there was more agreement on the language, and draft number 1.3 of S 310 this amendment includes that language. This language in here was agreed to by the Public Service Department, the 911 Board, Vermont Emergency Management, and the cable companies in Vermont. This is sort of compromise language. There's not 100% agreement, but many of the details, most of the details would be worked out in rule. So the telecom companies who are not entirely
wireless companies are not on board. They were definitely not on board in here.
The one organization that is still concerned is a national organization of the CTIA or whatever it is. That is a national organization of corporate wireless telecom. They don't want to have to report outages to customers. They already are required to do so in California, and the language in this is similar to the language in California, except for that it's less burdensome, that the details would be worked out in rule. So that the telecom companies would have a chance to work with the 911 board to work out the details. Vermont, Comcast, for example, is fine with that, and they came and testified to that. You know, as far as, I think when you're dealing with, sort of corporate entities, of course, they're not gonna wanna report things, they would rather not have the requirement to
Okay, but
report.
the last I heard, your goal was to get information so people could be alerted when there's a tornado headed their way.
Correct.
So, but you're now talking about something else, which was notification for outages, which I thought we followed the California model and did a few years ago.
So this has always, since you saw the bill, these two provisions have been in here. This has been in here from the beginning as it was passed out of
Okay.
government operations, as doing both. Both requiring, telecom companies to report their data to, the 911 board and to report outages. Not all of them have to do it. So there are three types. There's three types of telecommunication or phone providers, and not all of them have had the wireless, I believe, or the cable providers are not providing the data at this point. And not all of them are letting their customers know when there's an outage. Specifically an outage that means that they cannot contact 911. So that's how the connection to the 911 system is, that this is an outage that prevents customers from using their phone to call 911.
We did that, was it Shrewsbury that was out in a week, and there was a town. It might even be over in your county that had electricity out for over a week, and we did a lot of work 2 or 3 years ago on what you, when you can't.
Not all of them are required to under current law, and this would bring everybody in under the same umbrella to say they are required to report. Some of them do on their own, and some do not.
And what
So
do
this
we do when they report?
this is to let customers know. So they have to report to 911 when there's an outage, but they don't have to. They don't.
If
The
their means of communication is down, how do
Right.
they let me know?
So the California law requires that they provide information on their website about what the outage is and where the outage is, so that if somebody is trying to contact 911 and is not able to, they are able to see on the phone company's website that there is an outage.
If they have an outage, how do they get to the website? That's the BC communication.
Because they could still have internet access to a website. This is about phone, not internet.
I'm talking about phone, but many of us get our phones through the internet, leave the phone. That's how I get my phone.
VoIP service.
Yep, but this is in order for customers to have a place to go to understand where the outage is and how it could potentially impact them.
Okay.
Some phone companies also provide the notification through email to their customers, but not all of them do that.
Well, again, I'm just struck by that. I think Comcast going along with it. It's no harm to Comcast, because in my house, I get my phone and my internet with Comcast. And they notifies, it's like notifying the dead letter office.
Well, Comcast is okay with the language
I
in
imagine, because they
here.
don't have to do anything.
No, they would have to provide a notification on their website to say that they have.
I just struck by it. There are a lot of our area where the website and the phone and all that is the same thing. And there's no broadcast available anymore like there used to be. And so they put it on the website, we still wouldn't see it.
Mhm. Madam Chair, the Government Operations Committee worked on this issue at length and took a lot of testimony. And one of the reasons that we came to this language and came to the desire to require both reporting of data and notification to customers is because our 911 system is saying that doing these things would make it safer and more robust system in the event of an emergency. And that is the goal of the bill.
Julie, we're running a little late.
Okay, should I go back?
Yeah, maybe in 10, 15 minutes. Sure.
So some of the testimony that I've seen from CTIAA raises another concern that I'm curious if your committee resolved. It speaks specifically to the national security implications of the broadcasting on a website when service or cell phone coverage is down. That if you were going to want to commit a crime, knowing that your cell phone is not being tracked in its locations, did your committee resolve that any concerns raised at the national level of broadcasting where our cell towers are no longer, or not currently broadcasting?
What we heard in testimony was that that was not an issue that was a concern of anyone except for theirs, and the California law, which is in effect right now, has dealt with that issue in their statute that requires. So if it can be done in California, I think it can be done in Vermont.
Just to quickly follow up, it was raised by the FCC when they decided to explicitly not adopt this mandate. So that, okay, their testimony to the contrary.
We heard their concerns and we felt like the need to have notification of customers in Vermont was more important, and that if it can be done in California, if they have worked through the issues in California, that they can work through the issues here in
Well, I would
we have it in rulemaking.
You know, California is not Vermont.
No.
We have a very small, understaffed 911 system. And we just gave them a huge dispatch project, which they aren't making a whole lot of progress on. And now we're going to load them up with this. And I'm concerned nothing might get done if we overload them.
This is coming at the request of 911. This
Okay.
language came at the request of 911. It's been agreed to by 911, by the Public Service Department, by the cable companies, and by the Vermont Emergency Management. All of them agree on this language. They have specifically requested this be included in the bill.
Basically, what you brought us is the original language with the agreement that Comcast said, we've got an agreement. And there was a piece of paper being shaken around saying, we'll agree to this. We had the other wireless people saying, well, we won't. Have you brought us anything different other than that agreement between 911 and Comcast?
Yes, one of the things that this amendment does is that some of the details on how it would be worked out in rulemaking. And also there were some changes in the language, including some changes in the language that the national organization requested that we included in, and I don't have
National organization.
the one that Senator Chittenden was quoting from.
Oh, that's the wireless.
Yes, they have made some requests that we did include in here. We didn't include all of their requests. But about whether or not there was, and I'm sorry, I don't have the highlighted version, so I can't remember exactly all the changes, but that in some cases, the data is not available. So there was a word put in about if available. There was, as I said, the rulemaking. There was some changes in the transmission versus provision because it's a technical, it's technically transmitted, not provided, the data. So there were changes made to the language compared to where it was. This also includes a couple little other small changes that were necessary in other sections of the bill, but
Yes.
So these recommendations are based on the 911 committee's recommendations,
the 911,
advisory committee.
no, the executive director of the 911 board came and testified and worked on this with the Public Service Department, the Vermont Emergency Management, and the cable operators.
When did the 911 board meet and come up with these recommendations?
They met earlier in the session, when we first put this language in, this language has been in the bill for weeks and weeks and weeks. So when we first,
My question was, did the 911 board meet and vote on these recommendations?
I don't know because but the executive director was acting in her capacity as executive director. I don't know if she got a formal vote from her board. You can ask her about that, but this was what she brought to us in her capacity and in her authority as the executive director of the 911 board.
You don't have a record of the board actually meeting and discussing this?
I trust that witnesses are acting in their own authority when they come and testify before us. She is a professional and she has integrity and would not come and testify and request information or request legislative changes that she is not authorized to request.
Even by accident?
I would say that even by accident, she wouldn't do that, and it's been weeks and weeks and weeks, and if she had erred, I'm sure that she would come to us and say, I'm sorry, I didn't have the authority to say that, I retract that, or I retract my testimony. We get testimony from witnesses all the time, and we have to trust that they are doing so within their authority and their own expertise.
Yes, 32.
I guess my other concern from this letter is that the wireless network has a lot of FCC guidelines and rules where they fail over to other towers. So if a Verizon tower is down, then the AT&T or the T-Mobile, those other ones don't resiliently cover each other. And so I feel like a lot of these communication plans have already been worked out at the national level, that I don't have enough confidence in what I'm seeing so far with the concerning testimony that we've worked through, how Vermont can better dictate to the wireless companies how they can communicate when one of their towers is out and resilient into self-supporting system of towers.
But can I just ask, they already do this in California. They know how to do this. There's not like a new methodology they have to create.
Correct. They already do this in California, and the details of how the reporting would happen would be worked out in rulemaking. So it may be exactly the same as California, which they are all already required to do. Or it may be different based on what the landscape here is in Vermont, but it would be worked out in rulemaking. It doesn't specify the details in here.
Where does it state in this bill or in current law that a level of redundancy and how redundancy is defined in the case of emergency? You're in a pretty center, but we had 911 on the screen here on Friday, and just speaking for myself, when we asked questions, the answers were not forthcoming. It seemed very vague that unable to nail down the system of anticipating emergencies and what the backups were and what was called for and what the 911 board had recommended and when they recommended it and what the text of their recommendations were. So
Senator, I
that
think
might have been some of my failing, but
it was so that I think I don't want to interrupt, Madam Chair. So this amendment and what is in the bill isn't about the technicalities of the system or the infrastructure of the system. It is about requesting or requiring the transmission of data only. Who are your customers and what are their phone numbers? So that when there is an emergency, the 911 system has that data. And then the Vermont Emergency Management Emergency Alert System has that data. It's not about the poles or the lines or the failover or any of the technical things so I think what is the issue here, Senator, is you're asking questions about something that's not in this bill. What this is literally about providing data.
Okay, what data? Because we talk about two things. One is the list of their customers and their phone numbers so they can be reached. The other one, which I'm not seeing related at all, is when there's an outage, which I believe we put the California law into effect here 3, 4, 5 years ago. Well, we most certainly put something in. Barb Neal asked for it, and it was based on the California law, and it was reporting outages. So there is a law in place.
What's required in current law is that the companies tell 911
That's
when there's an outage.
Yes.
It's not required that they tell customers. And that's what this is telling customers that there's an outage. What you put into place was requiring the companies to tell the 911 system that there's an
Right.
outage.
I'm getting more confused because I'm not seeing how notifying their customers that their cell phone or, their cable is out. I think they used it. I'm not sure how that's gonna help someone who has a heart attack and can't reach 911. And it's because I've heard we're asking them to tell their customers. I thought we were asking them to tell their customers when there was a tornado heading down the street or a wall of water on the way down the river and there was an emergency coming. Are we asking them to do that, or are we asking them just to post on their website, which I may or may not be able to reach, that my cell service is down, or there's my phone service is down?
Well, I would say with all due respect that the phone companies are not the ones that should be reporting about whether there's a wall of water coming or a tornado coming. That's not that is for
Okay,
someone else to report.
So
But
is-
it is to require them to report when there's an outage of their own service. So if I'm paying AT&T to provide service to me and they are not able to because there's an outage in their system, this would require them to provide notification to their customers that there's an outage. Right now, they are not required to do that. And it would require them to do it at a minimum on a website. It says at a minimum, and it would be, the details would be worked out in rule. And it is modeled after, it's not exactly the same because the details would be worked out in rule. But it is modeled after what these phone companies all already have to do in California.
what do you want this committee to do?
Well, so because this committee voted to remove section 19, what the Government Operations Committee is requesting is that this amendment be a substitute amendment to the removal of the section as section 19. So that there would be the preservation of language for transmitting data and notifying customers of an outage.
Okay, your committee could make that amendment on the floor. You could vote to amend ours or to not accept ours. I polled the committee, but Senator Chitton,
So I guess since I believe part of our jurisdiction is utilities and telecommunications, I wouldn't feel comfortable including back that language unless we heard from somebody from California to walk through how they work through the national security concerns and the resiliency of the network. So I personally can't be comfortable with this language, but I'm just one little senator. I don't know if that means anything.
I'm looking for another phrase, so Senator.
So I wish I could remember the details, but we had a very similar conversation at Elcar roughly 18 months ago. And settled where we are based on the hearing that we, in that whole rulemaking. So I don't have a definitive answer for like what the details were that helped us land where we were, but it was a very similar question about adopting the California standard.
You may just be getting the rules for what we did 3 years ago, with requiring, and it was based on California, that the companies report to 911 when they had an outage. That,
There's a deja vu all over again. It's very,
yeah.
for me, it's at Elkhart. To me, but You're gonna have to go back and look at my file and see, I don't know why we landed where we did then, but.
Senator McDonald.
Notifying your customers that there's an outage. This doesn't worry me so much. Having an outage and not being able to notify the customers that the dam is leaking and about to break. Doesn't appear to be in here. Or any recommendation on that. And I don't,
Yeah, I think that's where we're getting confused. I think what you're trying to do is get all the phone numbers so that in an emergency, state emergency office could notify people, could send everyone an alert.
Yes, correct. So
you go.
this is one section of a 70-page bill, Senator. So there are other sections in the bill that deal with the Vermont Emergency Alert System. So this was one section of the bill where we were trying to make our emergency communication system more robust. And one of the things that we heard was that would help make the system more robust so that the next time we have a big emergency like we did last summer, is that our 911 system would have more complete data. Right now, they have a lot of data and they're able to use that as in the reverse 911 and also in the 911 system at large, they're able to use that, but they don't have complete data. So this would provide them with the section of data that they don't have yet. And then further would require telephone companies to also alert their customers. So they're getting an alert from the company that they're literally paying service to, saying, I'm paying for this phone service and that company needs to tell me when that phone service doesn't work. And then they also, if there's a state of emergency, could potentially be getting a reverse 911 alert from Vermont Emergency Management in conjunction with the 911 board. So it is twofold. It's if you were talking about failover, it's saying we want the company itself that is responsible for providing a service to an individual that they are paying for to notify the customer when they can't pay for that service or when they can't provide that service.
How are they supposed to do that? If my Comcast is out, I have no computer, no Wi-Fi, no TV, no nothing. So I can't they don't have my cell number. I suppose if I have a cell phone, the last thing I think to go, maybe I go to their website and say, what's the matter? But I know that it's out because nothing works.
So the California law requires notification on the website with details about what the outage is, where it is and why.
We're not California.
I understand that, Madam Chair. I'm just simply saying, this is what was requested of us from the 911 board. They requested this information, they requested this language in order to make our emergency communication system more robust. Because what we were trying to do in the Government Operations Committee was to, the next time we have an emergency like we did last summer, that the government is able to respond better. And part of that response is the responsibility of private companies who people entrust with their with a service. And they need to both provide data so that we can alert people and then also alert their customers.
Okay. I'm trying to get a sense of the committee, if we are comfortable. Can I take Senator McCormick first, because he hasn't had a chance to speak?
And I think I'm asking the witness, but I'm not sure, maybe that I could use a comparison of what the bill said, what the relative section of the bill said before it was amended, what the bill says now, and what this new amendment will say. What are those three?
Well, we've got Julia waiting in the wings, so, I don't know if we have time to get all of that. This is starting to feel, we were taking this up at 4:30, 5 o'clock on Friday. So it was, we had to get it out.
I would benefit from a Cliff Notes version. I mean, just to
Okay,
basically, this is what it said, this is what it says now, this is what it'll say if we amend it.
So the changes are relatively minor. But it was language that, made it, I think the largest change is that the details of how the notification itself would happen would be worked out in
In
rulemaking
rules,
process.
yeah.
And that made the telecom companies that the 911 board was working with more comfortable because they knew that the details of how the notification would happen would be through the rulemaking process, and they would have a chance to weigh in on what the details were, how it would work, and what technologically they would be able to do. And they would deal with some of the concerns that Senator Chittenden has raised and others about how could it work. So that is the largest change, is that's moving the details to the rulemaking process for the notification. In terms of
Norman,
wasn't it most things going to rulemaking in the original bill?
I think that the details of how it would work would all be in rule now. There's a minimum requirement that
Okay, so you've taken out the details and
yes,
put it into rules.
and then
who's doing the rules?
the 911 board. And then the other things that were changed were mostly technical changes with the language for the data sharing. And how it was done, and there's a lot of things about Annie and Ally. And I am not an expert on that, but I do, I mean, you should hear from Barb, if you want to hear the details on that.
We hear from Barb, who needs to do it.
I understand, Madam Chair, and I guess I would ask you to trust the Government Operations Committee that spent weeks on this bill and weeks on this issue. This was brought to us as part of how we make our emergency communication system more robust in the event of emergency. It was a request by 911.
Okay.
Can I ask maybe a process question? I don't know if Mark's is a process.
I'm gonna do the process. You've had some time to speak. I'm
I
trying to
haven't
get.
spoke, I've asked questions.
You bet. Oh,
let's
okay.
form a speech.
Well, then you can speak right after.
I'm wondering if it might help to take just a straw poll, like an informal poll for the committee is.
What I'm trying to get to.
Yes.
I've got Senator McCormick speak, and then we'll do a straw poll. And we can do a not short straw.
I'm not the nice,
He's
You're
the
not the
common.
nice one. No, he's the nice. one.
you called me the nice. So, Madam Chair, within the last several weeks, the system which deals with emergencies, the government, the notification failed.
Yeah,
All right.
they're ready to go, so.
Okay, well, I'm just.
They're pretty far gone.
The system
I was gonna blame
that
Brady.
deals with emergencies and notifications failed.
Yeah.
And while it had failed, there was no emergency system. And none of the data that, whether you have this amount of data or a lot more data, was of any use because it was untransmittable and people were not able to be notified that there was no system at the time. And that lasted for, it was 6 hours or 5 hours or 8 hours, that there was no emergency system. And the 911 board's job is to recommend to us how to not have that happen again. Have they recommended, Senator, to your committee, what rules they would call for to not have that happen again?
To not have the 911 system have the fail, I'm not sure what failure
The
you're
system
talking
that
about.
does emergency management in case of emergencies failed, as did the state's is it AT&T that operates the system? It failed and there was no
Was
emergency
this during the
system.
flood?
No, this was,
The AT&T outage was an AT&T outage and they were not required to notify their customers of the outage. It wasn't a state outage, it was an AT&T outage.
so what is the recommendation of the 911 board, whose job it is to advise us on how to deal with emergencies. What is their recommendation for what needs to be in place to see that that failure doesn't happen again?
Well, the AT&T outage had nothing to do with 911. That was a private company's service outage. But this is what the board, the 911 board is recommending to us was this language. They have worked on this for weeks with their partners and the Public Service Department and Vermont Emergency Management. This is a collectively what the state partners are requesting in order to make sure that our 911 system is more robust in the case of an emergency. This is what they're requesting. Among other things, and there are other things in the bill, but this is the specific language about data collection and notification that they have requested, Senator.
Okay,
So I was looking at what the board's job was. And this discussion about having a longer list and more data doesn't solve the problem of what happens when their ability to transmit data fails. And when it fails, telling the people who can't get the data that their system has failed ignores the emergency that they're unable to share.
I think you're confusing private telephone company systems and the Vermont Emergency Management System. They are two completely different things.
right, but we know.
To the
the
people
lines
who
go
were about
down
to get hit
911
with the
can't-
flood, it doesn't matter that they're separate. What's the solution when it fails?
Well, can I just say, I think the point of this is to notify more people in more ways and do better. And the hope then would be that you have someone who's a neighbor or in the same household as someone else who might get the information. So we don't have a perfect 100% system. But it sounds like the goal is that more people have more ways of being notified that they can share broadly in whatever community they are a part of, if there's time.
Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap this up if we have fully closed the field.
Thank you for allowing me to ask the question, Madam.
Anybody can ask, but it's already recorded.
Okay. First, I mean, this is gonna sound wise guy crap, but it seems to me when my phone goes on, I notice. No one needs to tell me that my communications are broken down, I notice, but. State government 101, Constitution paints with a broad brush, this is how we're constituted. The legislature legislates policy. Policy is saying, this is what everyone has to do, this is what you can't do, this is how we're running the state. And then we hand it off to administrators to work out the details. They paint with the finest brush. Okay, and that's how it's always done. That's how it probably, in my view, ought, unless there's some other reason why it ought to be done this way. And then we have things like boards who can establish rules, but ultimately everything is handled by administrators who enjoy something called administrative discretion. They have a certain amount of wiggle within the law. Well, the rules have wiggle room within the law. The administrator has wiggle room within the rules. And if our idea is we want to make sure that the information gets out there when the system breaks down, that as many people as possible get as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. Which of these three scenarios does that? The bill as it was, the bill as it is now having been amended, or the bill as it will be after, if we were to pass
Well,
this
I
amendment?
think we took out everything, because when it came here a week ago, it was not ready for prime time. This committee worked on notifications of outages.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked on this, but we got a few minutes last Friday. And few minutes today. The question for us is, GovOps can put this bill on the floor. But does anybody here feel comfortable enough, like you can get up and explain this bill on the floor and say, this is our substitute? Or you can just be quiet, or we can approve it if GovOps puts it out. I'm not getting a sense that anybody is really comfortable at this point, but I can be wrong.
I could be comfortable with deferring to the administrators. If we're clear on the policy, then it's not our job to work out the details, it's the administrator's job.
Okay,
But it's not their job to write the law, we write the law, so.
but we haven't worked on this law, so I guess it's hard to tell, for us to make a judgment, because we haven't been through it all.
What my request was to have this be a substitute amendment to the finance amendment, which removed the section altogether. So that we would say, we're not gonna do the finance amendment, removing the section, we're gonna instead do this amendment. And it can come from the GovOps committee, but my assumption was that, the Senate didn't want two committees fighting it out on.
No,
So that's why I was trying to come in here and work it out with you all in committee. You and I had talked, Madam Chair,
Yep.
that had been the plan.
Well, I never agreed that this committee would sponsor a bill. I can't agree with that for my committee.
I understand that, but the Government Operations Committee has worked at length on many facets of our emergency response systems, and this is just a small piece. There are other provisions in the bill about Vermont emergency response, Vermont emergency alerts, emergency planning, a whole bunch of stuff in the bill. So, this was one small piece, and I think it's part of a larger puzzle about how do we help people get the information they need during an emergency.
Right.
And we can't do that if there's not data available.
And I think this committee hasn't had all that time to do all that work. When it came to us, we had to make a decision quickly or the whole bill would die. We weren't comfortable. We had people on the screen saying, no. We've got people saying, well, maybe, and we've got Neil, and it did not feel like a product that was ready for prime time. So I'm leaving it to the committee. Keisha?
It sounds like it would at least be useful to the government operations chair if she got an informal straw poll, so she could decide if it's gonna be a GovOps amendment or we're gonna move it through this committee. In that vein, I'll just say, I generally agree with Senator McCormick. I think a lot of the stakeholders have come together, found agreement. We have a national group that doesn't want even a piece about rulemaking, which to me seems like a fair way to address an issue that they may have to deal with in more and more states. And the largest state in the country has already asked them to comply with this, and they are. So I have dealt with other bills we have in our committee where, big industry doesn't want to do something that they already can do in another place because they don't like to see this happen in more and more places. But I don't think it will harm Vermonters for us to ask for that.
So I've got two partial yeses. Senator Gregg,
So we worked
is this a vote for,
a long time on telecom, and there's a fair amount of technical complexity to that system. And this feels a little less policy-like to me and more like an implementation point of view. And because we had conflicting technical on it, and there are technical details under the hood that for myself, I haven't, I would feel irresponsible sitting on the committee that had jurisdiction over telecommunication and say, I understand all the details well enough to say, good to go. you know, like your question, could you report this on the floor? I'm not sure where we're at. I myself, I don't feel.
That's what I'm trying. The question is, will this committee stand up and say, this is our substitute amendment?
It's,
In,
The GovOps committee can present it, it's just whether or not the finance committee is gonna fight it, is what I wanna
I
know.
don't think we're gonna fight anything. I'm not sensing that.
I don't know enough about it to fight.
Yeah, I think that's.
Or to report.
Or to report.
We could,
Yeah.
GovOps committee can sponsor it and report it, I just want, I mean, I had hoped to get your support, it doesn't sound like I will be able to do that,
I've only heard from Senator Chin.
I just want to highlight, if we were to support this, I want to hear that the E911 board with all their expertise and Chief Steve Locke, Captain Lance Berman, Sheriff Roger Marco, that they all support this. This is news to me when Senator McDonald was probing on if it was just the director or the whole board.
So
So
we've got to make a decision. I think what I'm hearing is none of us is going to feel strongly enough to stand up and say, no. I think you've improved it. I don't think this committee has had time enough. You know, we've had 2 1 hour, kind of less than an hour sessions with it, and we haven't been through the process. So I think it's.
We'll trade you on the next tax bill. We'll send it over to you. You support it without reading it.
We are working on a tax bill that will come to you afterwards, so,
Different appropriations.
Is this our bill? Is this, are we presenting?
no, it's our.
We voted
It is your bill.
This is our bill.
So we don't have to take a
Yeah,
position.
we don't take a position. Does that, hurt you at all?
Well, there's an amendment in the calendar, which is the finance amendment that removes section 19.
Right.
So what I would like to do is substitute that with this.
That's fine.
And I just wanted to make sure I didn't want surprises on the floor, I didn't want your committee battling my committee on the floor. None of that would be pretty or productive. And so I was trying to be cooperative and
Yeah.
transparent with all of you
I
and,
see what you get.
Where's my last name?
Yeah.
So that's why I, was trying to work with you and trying to make you feel comfortable. It's clear that I'm not gonna be able to make you feel comfortable. I can get the answer about the 911 board, I'm sure of it. I know that Barb does her job well and checks in with her board when it's appropriate. And so I would be shocked if she didn't in this case as well.
Okay, so I think, I'm not seeing anybody here that's gonna be jumping up saying, no, 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 tomorrow. I think we just didn't have time to get into the details when we got it. It was getting dark and it was a mess. And so we just said, take it out, because we don't have time to fix it.
Okay,
We may have fixed it, and I think we'll all just sit in our seats and be very
But
quiet.
don't we have to take some kind of position on the floor? As the chair, we have an amendment on the calendar.
I can stand up and
Yeah, right.
say that finance just hasn't had time to get into the details. We basically think if this is what GovOps thinks will work, we'll go along with it. And if it doesn't work, we'll yell at you.
well, I mean, there's still a long path for the bill, so I'm sure that there will be more testimony in the House and
Yeah,
they
that's
can-
right. Yeah, another whole.
Yeah. All right, thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
We do that, or are we able to just say we don't have an opinion?
I think I can say that we.
We don't have an opinion, because that way, not committee, to have an opinion on something that we haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, I think we just.
Except we amended the bill.
this is effectively undoing our amendment. So
Yeah, this is undoing it, so
This is.
we have to say that's okay,
And.
or not.
And what I can say is, it was presented to us, we really didn't feel at either pass through that we had enough time to work out the details so that we completely understood them. And so we are just,
Basically, we're just responding to the amendment that's being presented by saying we did not have sufficient time to review the amendment and to give our finding on it, therefore we have no opinion on it, and then not say anything
Make
else.
their own decision, yeah.
Because we don't, I
No,
can't.
I think that's it.
But that amendment is a substitute amendment, substituted for our.
Ours, yes.
They're saying that we should have to do this and
Okay,
not.
I'm gonna have Julia come up because she's been sitting here for 2, 3, you've been hanging around waiting for us for a while. And we're gonna have a really fun topic next, yes.
So I appreciate that no one wants to have the confusion of committees disagreeing on the floor. But the problem is, we made a choice in committee, we brought up with a report.
Yes,
Now there's the report's coming to the floor, and we have an amendment being offered that essentially eliminates our report. And so I would think we would want to have a committee position on the amendment, because Peloton is our area of jurisdiction.
but and I think that's the problem, that this is our area of jurisdiction, we've done work in, reporting outages. We got the bill, we had people in on our sections. We did approve section 4, and it's the only money she's getting, I think. But we just haven't had time. This is a highly technical thing. The carriers are not all in agreement with this, and if they, we're just willing to let it go to rules. That
Yeah.
works.
Well, so the part that makes me uncomfortable, maybe I'm being too fastidious, is like, I feel like our colleagues count on us to vet any telecommunications proposal. And to be silent on it feels like,
It's an action in and of itself.
it's, yeah, it's we're saying it's okay in effect, and because of all the work we've done in the confusillation where we left it, which made us take 19 out. I don't want to signal to the room like, hey, good to go, we'll see what.
Oh, I don't know. I think we'll say, these are highly technical. We have had probably a total of an hour to look at it, if that. We don't feel completely comfortable that this will solve the problem, but.
Well,
at
is
this
there
point,
another,
we
is there
can't
an option of asking for the committee, asking for a delay to give us time to look at it? Because I certainly have no opinion one way or the other, because I don't fully understand it, and
I don't
no
think
opportunity to really ask questions about it.
if we hold it, it's just gonna be more, if they'll even let us hold it. We could ask to have it passed over, and we could spend tomorrow
This
listening to everybody.
If this was in a gray area, I'd be fine with saying nothing, but this squarely falls into our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to take a vote on if we support either this amendment coming from them or here. And but I've taken less testimony on things that I've had to vote on before than this.
I just don't like to vote on things I don't understand. I don't
I think
understand.
that was the problem.
And I don't think we should take a position one way or the other, because we don't know. We haven't looked at it.
We haven't had any witnesses in. I'm concerned that they're asking for too much. I think I don't want them calling my cell phone to tell me my telephone is out. I mean, I know it.
So perhaps you take this conversation back to Senator Hardy, and we don't try to pick a vote today, because I think Senator Hardy would want to be back in the ring for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we told her we were not gonna take a position. That's what we say on the floor, because we haven't had enough time. And this is our area of jurisdiction.
Yes, even when you say enough time, there's enough time tomorrow. Who are you gonna get to testify
Well,
tomorrow?
that's it. I don't know that.
And what are they gonna say? I'm not even at a point of formulating the questions that I want to answer.
So nobody's committed to, they're not gonna say anything, I guess, like, it might
For
come up.
heaven's sakes, don't put that bait out there.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I don't know, I think we need to tell Senator Hardy, if we've all like agreed to a path forward, if you're gonna communicate to her, there are reservations, and let her see
I
if she
think
wants.
she knows there's
There's
reservations.
Okay, did we commit to her that we wouldn't say anything else?
I think that we are gonna stand up and say, this is the best thing since apple pie, and say,
Mhm.
this thing is a dog that should be shot at. Because we haven't had time to figure that out. that's the problem with the end of the session. Somebody's spent 3 months and sends us in the last 2 days what would take us probably several weeks to get all the witnesses in and do due diligence, and we can't. We can signal the house that they might not want to look at it, but it's just a thing.
We don't. The law calls for a written assessment and plan of how to deal with emergency outages.
Right.
And we're the oversight committee. Have we seen that plan? Does it exist?
Or, we wrote the law that said they have to notify 911.
No, that wasn't the
No.
question. The question is, in the case of the emergency preparedness notifications
Yeah.
fail,
There's no,
911 board has been designated as the folks to recommend a solution. I believe the statute says that they will contract for someone to design a system that in case the failure has backup.
Mhm.
Have we seen that?
I haven't,
But we're the oversight
yes,
and we're being asked to amend a bill that appears to ignore that particular
Yes.
part of our work,
yes,
and we're arguing over
okay.
we're discussing the ins and outs of something that is
I'm gonna let
peripheral
Julia
to
go,
our
because I don't,
oversight.
Julia, I don't think this committee is going to focus on ed funding, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
I think we're up to our eyes.
Sorry, I scared away. Julia.
Yeah.
Julia's-
I'm not scared away. I'm happy to come back.
We've heard worse than this when it comes to funding.
Maybe Chair, as a segue,
Yes,
one possibility would be could stand by our removal of this language with a commitment that we will take some testimony before the end of the session. We can add this back to a miscellaneous bill when we all feel comfortable with this this topic that falls in our jurisdiction.
it's not what
Then we
we
can hear
are
from
told.
Julia on it funding.
Senator Hardy,
Well, we'd have to tell her something more.
That's
I
what I
mean,
would
the
do.
bill will come back, to the Senate one day.
This testimony is pretty compelling, especially with a national security perspective and the
well,
resiliency.
I think a lot of that, they have worked that out in California, I think a lot of that is a smokescreen. I do understand that half the, you know,
Sorry, she's waiting for you.
no. We're gonna work this out.
Sounds great. I will see you all soon.
Yes.
Good luck.
Thank
It's
you.
such a fun committee.
If we could get a dispensation long enough to do it, and do the job right, but it's just half-baked job of trying to vote something on, in any direction that we haven't read and haven't fully understood. That's just not good.
No,
This
it's
is-
not good, and we were very pressured. I think the question is, do we want to kill this whole bill?
We never proposed that. We said, here's a troublesome section, let's take it out.
And she wants it in because it's part of Barb Neal's plan. I think E911 should have as many phone numbers as they can get. I have no idea why we should ask that people to tell you that your phone's not working when you
On the phone.
on the phone, yes.
It's not.
I mean, I don't care if they do it in California. I'm just not sure we, along with all this other stuff that we're doing.
So can I say just something, I'll be 30 seconds or less, which is just to say, when our colleagues counting us to that anything related to telecommunications as the committee of jurisdiction. And then we're saying, we're not really sure, and there's serious questions, and
Yeah.
what was the plan, and who voted on it actually, if it the appropriacy brought forward. I mean, I've heard like 7 different questions, and
Yeah.
and we went through the whole LCAR experience with the California standard and what was different about California than Vermont came up. I can't put my finger on that.
I
detail,
will
but
bet you it
it
was the
wasn't the
same
same.
thing we did. I mean, those,
So, I'm just feeling like, this is without
Okay.
fear or favor, it's like, I couldn't report it, I couldn't stand up for it,
okay,
I would
I
just say
am
to be prudent, I
going to
want
have
to
to
take it out.
tell Senator Hardy that we are off the reservation. Since the pro tem was monitoring us, I think I need to tell him that we're off the reservation. And would we like to remove this section of the bill, work on it some more, and commit to sticking it on something else. I don't know what else we could find to stick it on. Is that what we want?
Even if the House concurs,
In that scenario, Chair, even the House could take this up too. So if we
Yes,
stick with our
House will take it up.
amendment, stripping it out, we can
Okay.
also discuss.
Well, I will,
Sorry.
I will see if I can negotiate a peace.
Yes.
Good luck.
Well,
Yes,
IE or EA.
starting with the disclaimer, this is the committee of jurisdiction.
Yes,
over-
it is.
Over,
yeah,
so that's it. However, the bill in question is not a utilities bill.
no, it is.
It's an emergency response bill. And that arguably is jurisdiction
Yes,
of government operation.
right,
And the utility, and the emergency response package includes a utilities element.
yes.
So I don't think this is really that they're raiding our
No,
jurisdiction.
they aren't.
They're not taking our
This
cattle.
is just the end of the session.
Not taking our cattle.
Yeah,
But to Senator McCormick's point, I remember my first year and on that Zoom world, I was talking about some Act 250 stuff for transportation related, and it was very clear, we're not gonna put that in the T-bill. I went over, Senator Bray allowed me to testify on it, and so I think there's some importance to what Senator
Yeah.
Bray was
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
about jurisdictional authority and doing our due diligence as our colleagues are counting on.
and this is just a very complex, sometimes they're just very easy, you know, we're getting the money from here, we're putting it in there. But this is a very complex system, and we haven't got all the parties agree. And so we would like to stick it, stick with our decision, with the commitment that we will start working on it tomorrow. Because we don't have any H bills, but by tomorrow or the next day, we probably will get a ton. So we'll start working on it tomorrow, and we'll either get it on in the House or we'll pass it out in another bill. All right? No?
No, I just, okay, listen,
okay, listen.
I'm listening.
Rachel and I have been disagreeing about Act 250 and
Yes,
housing. But I have never suggested,
That's why I
I've
said,
never suggested that the Act 250 language in the housing bill doesn't belong there.
right. We're
I
not-
never said, this is our jurisdiction, so
Yes.
mind your own business, because there is an honest belief that it's impeded in housing.
Yeah,
Now, we can slug that one out on merits.
Yeah.
But as far as prerogatives and jurisdiction.
That's true.
I think
Yeah.
what we're saying is that we really didn't have enough time to do due diligence on this. And we could start our due diligence the next few
But I
days.
think Senator McCormick makes a good point about understanding, which is, you know, all session, Senator Hardy was, and GovOps were charged with, you know,
They did,
emergency processes to respond to
okay,
a disaster, and that's what they did. And maybe, and as long as you're saying that, you know, we were neutral to concerned, barring additional information, perhaps the Senate can do with that what they will, but it's still fair that she'd be allowed to move
Yeah.
forward with it, that we don't stymie.
We could just be silent, we could say,
well, that's what we told Senator Hardy we were going to do. That we didn't feel that we had enough time to do due diligence. We were not completely comfortable with this, but a lot of that is because we haven't had time to take enough testimony to dig into what the objections are. If you put it to rules, then it's gonna come back to us.
silence to me feels like tacit approval.
Yeah.
Especially after we acted to remove it because of concerns.
Okay. So I've got 2 for tacit approval, 2 for let it go. Okay, decided.
Those take-
No, I'm untacit on this.
You're not letting go either,
I
right?
don't want it to go.
Let it go in
because
both way.
I would like our amendment to stand, and I would honestly hope they don't offer an amendment. Substitute or otherwise, reinstall something that we were uncomfortable enough that we struck.
You're with,
Which is what? It's not, it's
Just
letting
say-
go out of the bill or?
To stay with what we proposed, which was to strip this
well, we
language.
will have to then go tell Senator Hardy, maybe I'll delegate that. That we've gone back on what we told her we were going to do.
Well, the reason we're reconsidering it is because we have something to reconsider. There's enough doubt about what we did that we wanted to consider what she had to say.
Okay.
And the point is, we just haven't had time to do it. And, you know, her response to us may,
When did we get that bill? It just came over, didn't it? Like last week?
It was crossover.
I think it came over.
I mean, I'm still inclined to ask to take more time to do it as an exception. You know, that the rules can be read and accepted.
Just let it sit on the calendar, not take it up.
It's gotta, yeah, well, yeah,
I would just assume try to take it up, you know, under an exception, take the testimony we need and be able to move on with some
I'm
confidence.
gonna say what the board.
Oh, I get that.
okay, let me go.
So you wanna go offline?
It came in when?
You wanna go offline? This
Yes,
is-
we should go offline. I will go talk to the pro tem's office, get an arm guard, talk to Senator Hardy.
Used to be a bouncer, would you like to join